Ethan Cole had learned that life rarely gave warnings before it changed forever. One minute, he was laughing with his wife in the hospital delivery room as they held their newborn daughter, Lily. The next, 3 years later, he was standing beside a cemetery in the cold November rain, trying to explain to a little girl why mommy wasn't coming home. Since then, life had become a blur of long workdays, unpaid bills, microwave dinners, and sleepless nights. Ethan drove a tow truck during the day and repaired engines at a local garage on weekends. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered even more. But Lily always came first. At 7 years old, she had her mother's soft brown eyes and the kind of smile that could disarm even the cruelest stranger. Ethan often worried he wasn't enough for her. He couldn't afford dance lessons or fancy vacations like the other parents at her school. Some nights, dinner was peanut butter sandwiches and canned soup. Still, Lily never complained. "You make the best soup in the world, Daddy," she'd say, even when he knew it tasted like warm salt water. And somehow, that kept him going. One stormy evening in downtown Chicago, Ethan picked Lily up from her after-school program and headed home through heavy rain. Traffic crawled. Thunder shook the sky. The heater in his old truck barely worked. Then Lily suddenly pointed toward the sidewalk. "Daddy," she whispered, "that lady is crying." Ethan glanced over. Near a bus stop stood a young woman soaked to the bone, clutching herself against the freezing wind. Her white dress, once elegant, was torn at the hem and stained with mud. One of her high heels was broken. Mascara streaked her cheeks as cars splashed dirty rainwater around her. People passed without looking twice. Ethan almost kept driving. He was exhausted, broke, late for rent. The world had taught him that helping strangers often came with trouble. But then Lily spoke again. She looked scared. Those 3 words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Without another thought, he pulled over. The woman startled when Ethan approached. Her eyes widened with fear, like she expected him to hurt her. "It's okay," Ethan said gently. "My daughter saw you standing here. Are you all right?" The woman hesitated before quietly saying, "I just need somewhere warm for a little while." Lily leaned across the seat and smiled. "You can sit with us." The woman looked at the child for several seconds before climbing into the truck. Her hands trembled violently from the cold. Ethan handed her his spare hoodie. "Thank you," she whispered. They drove in silence for a while. Eventually, Ethan stopped at a small diner near the highway. It wasn't much, but the soup was hot and the coffee was cheap. The woman barely touched her food at first. Then Lily slid her own slice of pie across the table. "My daddy says people feel better after dessert." For the first time, the stranger smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. Her name, she finally admitted, was Victoria. Ethan didn't pry. He figured everyone carried wounds they weren't ready to explain. But over the next hour, pieces of the story slipped out. Victoria had run away from her wedding, not because she didn't love the man she was supposed to marry, but because she realized she was being treated more like a business deal than a person. Her fiancé came from one of the wealthiest families in America. The marriage would merge billion-dollar companies. Reporters called it the wedding of the decade. But behind the cameras and designer gowns, Victoria felt trapped. "No one cared what I wanted," she said quietly. "They only cared about appearances." "So you ran?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "I didn't even make it out of the city before security started looking for me." Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. Security. Victoria gave a nervous laugh. "My family owns half the buildings downtown." Lily's eyes widened. "Are you a princess?" Victoria looked at the little girl and smiled sadly. "Sometimes being rich feels like the opposite." By midnight, the rain had become dangerous. Roads flooded. Hotels were full because of a convention nearby. Ethan faced a choice. He barely had enough money for himself and Lily. Letting a stranger stay over was risky. But when he looked at Victoria, he didn't see a billionaire. He saw someone lost. So he offered her their couch. His apartment was tiny. The wallpaper peeled near the windows. The heater rattled like it might explode. Lily's room was separated by a curtain because Ethan couldn't afford a second bedroom. Victoria looked around in stunned silence. "You live here?" she asked softly. Ethan shrugged awkwardly. "It's not much." But that night, after Lily fell asleep, Victoria sat alone in the kitchen and cried. Not because the apartment was small, but because it felt warmer than the mansion she grew up in. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Victoria stayed. At first only until the storm passed, then until she could figure things out. She helped Lily with homework, cooked breakfast, laughed at Ethan's terrible jokes. And slowly, the apartment began to feel alive again. For the first time since his wife died, Ethan caught himself smiling without forcing it. But peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, black Chevys suddenly surrounded the garage where Ethan worked. Men in suits stepped out. Then came the cameras. Victoria's face turned pale. They found me. Within minutes, reporters flooded the street. Miss Remington, why did you disappear? Is it true you left your fiancé at the altar? Who is this man? Ethan froze. Remington. The Remington family. Everyone in America knew that name. Tech companies, hotels, media networks, billionaires. His coworkers stared at him in disbelief. Victoria turned toward Ethan, guilt filling her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant to drag you into this. Before Ethan could answer, another car arrived. An older man stepped out, sharp suit, silver hair, cold expression. Victoria's father, the billionaire himself. He barely looked at Ethan before saying, Victoria, get in the car. But she didn't move. Then something shocking happened. Little Lily stepped forward and grabbed Victoria's hand. No, she said bravely. She doesn't want to go. The street fell silent. The billionaire looked down at the little girl, clearly unaccustomed to anyone defying him. Then Lily said something that changed everything. She smiles here. Victoria burst into tears. Her father's expression shifted for the first time. Not anger, not pride, shame. Because in one innocent sentence, a child had exposed what millions of dollars could never buy: happiness. Weeks later, the story exploded across the country, but not for the reasons reporters expected. People weren't obsessed with the runaway wedding. They were moved by the struggling single father who had helped a crying stranger, with no idea who she was. Interviews poured in. Donations arrived anonymously to help Ethan and Lily. The garage owner promoted Ethan to manager, after customers flooded the business with support. But the biggest surprise came from Victoria herself. She walked into Ethan's apartment one evening, holding a folder. I convinced my father to create a foundation, she said, for single parents struggling after loss. Ethan stared at her speechless. In Lily's mother's name, Victoria added gently. Tears filled his eyes. Months later, Ethan stood in a new community center, packed with families receiving free childcare, counseling, and meals. Above the entrance hung a simple sign: the Grace Cole Family Center, named after his late wife. As Ethan watched children laughing inside, Victoria stood beside him holding Lily's hand. You changed my life, she told him softly. Ethan shook his head. No, he replied, a little girl did. Lily grinned proudly between them, and in that moment, Ethan finally understood something his wife used to say long ago. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the beginning of someone else's miracle. Because on a cold, rainy night, one exhausted single father chose to stop for a stranger, and that single choice changed all their lives forever.